If you work in healthcare, you already know this. Conflict is everywhere. In the OR, in labor and delivery, in committee meetings, between physicians, nurses, administrators, and teams that are all trying to do the right thing. But here's the problem. Most of us were never trained to handle conflict well. We learned procedures, we learned diagnostics, but we didn't learn how to navigate the moment when two professionals strongly disagree. That's why I developed the SPARK framework. SPARK stands for stop, pause, ask, don't assume, reflect and respond, and create a path forward. It's a practical system designed specifically for high-stakes healthcare environments. Through keynote talks, residency workshops, and SPARK masterclasses, I teach physicians, nurses, and healthcare teams how to turn destructive conflict into productive conversations that strengthen teams and improve care. If your hospital, residency program, or medical conference is looking for a speaker on conflict, communication, and leadership in healthcare, I'd love to work with you. You can learn more in the show notes, because in medicine, conflict is inevitable, but handled well, it can make teams stronger.
In every operating room, in every ward, in every clinic, and every team meeting, a silent battle brews. Conflict, negotiation, identity. Welcome to the Scalpel and Sword Podcast, where I, Dr. Lee Sharma, physician and conflict analyst, explore the hidden negotiations beyond modern medicine. Let's trade burnout for boundaries and learn the art of healing with precision and power.
Hello, my peaceful warriors, and welcome to the Scalpel and Sword Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Lee Sharma, physician and conflict analyst. And today I'm going to tell you a story. I remember when I was a third-year medical student on my pediatrics rotation, and I did my neonatal intensive care unit 2 weeks. I remember seeing the so tiny infants. I remember thinking about how do you start IVs in a baby that small. I remember thinking that in the NICU, life hangs by threads thinner than surgical sutures. And when a baby dies here, it's not simple. In fact, in the NICU, tragedy, unfortunately, is a fact of extreme prematurity. But sometimes patterns emerge. And when they do, someone has to decide whether to speak or stay silent. And in this episode of the Scalpel and Sword, we're going to explore the intersection of medicine, leadership, conflict, and today, a story about infant death, crime, and systemic issues in the United Kingdom. Medicine isn't just science, it's people, and people are complicated. Today's episode takes place in a neonatal unit in Northern England, and it asks a question that still divides medicine. What happens when doctors suspect harm, but the system refuses to listen? In 2015, something began happening inside the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Babies collapsed, suddenly and unexpectedly. Infants who had been stable deteriorated. A baby would crash, and then another. In the NICU, doctors are trained to think in physiology. Infection, respiratory failure, congenital anomalies, but sometimes patterns begin to disturb even the most rational mind. The attending physicians, which are consultants in the UK, started asking a quiet question. Why do these collapses keep happening during the same nurses' shifts? The nurse was Lucy Letby. At first, the suspicion was tentative. We're scientists. Correlation isn't causation. but the pattern kept happening. So they did what medicine tells you to do when something doesn't make sense. They raised concerns. You might imagine that when doctors raise concerns about patient safety, hospitals respond immediately. But hospitals are not just clinical institutions. They are organizations. Organizations with lawyers, reputations, budgets, and administrators. The doctors at Chester reportedly pushed leadership to investigate. Instead, the response was cautious, then resistant, and then confrontational. The physicians raising alarms were told they might be bullying a nurse. At one point, they were asked to apologize. Think about that for a moment. Doctors saying something is wrong. Administrators saying, "You're causing trouble." And inside the NICU, babies continued to collapse. Eventually, the case exploded into public view. Police investigated, and then Lucy Letby was arrested. And in 2023, she was convicted of murdering 7 infants and attempting to murder 7 more. The story seemed horrifying but straightforward. A nurse had betrayed the trust of medicine. One of the worst medical serial killers in modern British history. The case appeared closed, but medicine has a way of revisiting its own conclusions. And then something unexpected happened. An article was published in the New Yorker in 2024, raising the question of whether or not Lucy Letby might be innocent. And in 2025, Lucy Letby's defense team asked a neonatologist in Canada, whose paper had been used as part of the testimony on the part of the prosecution at her original trial. The paper was written by neonatologist Dr. Shoo Lee. And when the defense team reached out to him to ask for his help, he said that he would, with no charge at all, on one condition. Whatever he found, whether in support or not in support of Lucy Letby, he would report and report publicly. He asked a group of neonatologists from all over the world to examine the medical evidence with him. And in 2025, a group of international neonatology experts re-examined the medical evidence. Dr. Shoo Lee, a retired neonatologist from the University of Toronto and a pioneer in neonatal outcome research, led it. Dr. Lee and an international panel studied the cases presented at trial. 17 infants, 17 tragedies. And when they finished their review, they made a statement that stunned the medical world. We did not find any murders. According to Lee's panel, the deaths and injuries could be explained by natural causes and medical care problems, not intentional harm. Their report pointed to issues inside the hospital: unsafe delays in treatment, poor resuscitation skills, inadequate staffing, babies being cared for beyond the unit's capabilities, and a lack of teamwork between staff. Lee even said that in Canada, a unit with those conditions might have been shut down. Suddenly, the story wasn't simple anymore. Because now the question wasn't just, did a nurse commit murder? It became something far more uncomfortable. Did a system misinterpret tragedy? The NICU is a perfect storm for conflict. And to understand why this became so explosive, you have to understand something about NICU culture. The NICU runs on interdependence. Doctors make decisions. Nurses monitor every breath. Respiratory therapists control the ventilators. Pharmacists adjust microdoses of medication. No one person sees the whole picture, and when babies die, the cause is rarely obvious. Prematurity alone can create cascading failures: lung collapse, infection, necrotizing enterocolitis, intracranial hemorrhage. Every neonatologist has experienced nights where multiple babies deteriorate. So when patterns appear, the interpretation becomes vulnerable to something psychologists call narrative bias. Once we believe a story, we start seeing evidence that supports it. Now imagine the position of the NICU team. Doctors suspect a colleague. Nurses feel defensive. Administrators fear legal disaster. Everyone is operating under extreme stress, and once suspicion enters the room, trust evaporates. The NICU, which relies on teamwork, becomes a place of whispered conversations and fractured alliances. The Shoo Lee report suggests something else may have been happening. Not a murderer, but a unit under enormous strain, understaffed, overwhelmed, treating babies beyond the level the unit was designed to handle. In that environment, deaths cluster. And when clusters occur, people search for explanations. One of the key pieces of evidence during the trial involved a skin discoloration pattern the prosecutors linked to air embolism. The theory relied partly on earlier research by Dr. Shoo Lee. But Dr. Lee later argued that his work had been misinterpreted, saying the skin findings used in court were not reliable indicators of injected air. This is where medicine becomes uncomfortable, because medical science evolves. What seems definitive during a trial may later appear uncertain, and when uncertainty appears after a conviction, the consequences ripple through the entire system. Today, there are essentially two competing narratives. Story one, Lucy Letby was a killer who exploited the fragility of premature infants. Story two, a struggling neonatal unit experienced a series of tragedies that were later interpreted as crimes. The courts have ruled on the first narrative, but the medical debate continues. The case is now under review by legal authorities considering the expert panel's findings. And for doctors watching this unfold, the implications are profound, because either possibility is terrifying. If the conviction is correct, then healthcare systems failed to detect a killer quickly. But if the conviction is wrong, then medicine may have misinterpreted its own tragedies. What's the real lesson for us? Regardless of where the truth ultimately lands, the case exposes a deeper problem. Healthcare systems struggle with conflict escalation. Doctors hesitate to accuse colleagues. Nurses fear retaliation. Administrators worry about institutional reputation. So concerns move slowly, sometimes too slowly. But there's another danger as well. Once suspicions begin, systems may become too certain too quickly. And medicine is full of situations where certainty arrives before evidence. The NICU is supposed to be a place of extraordinary collaboration, tiny lives, and huge stakes, and teams united by one mission, survival. But the Lucy Letby case shows us how fragile that collaboration can be. Because when tragedy strikes repeatedly, medicine searches for meaning. Sometimes that meaning reveals the truth. And sometimes it reveals how deeply we need answers. Until the final investigations conclude, the case will remain one of the most controversial in modern medical history. But the deeper lesson may have nothing to do with one nurse. It may be something far more universal in healthcare. Conflict. Who speaks? Who listens? And whether the system is capable of hearing the alarm before the story hardens into certainty. This is the Scalpel and Sword, where the scalpel represents the science of medicine, and the sword represents the courage to confront the conflicts that shape it. Because sometimes the sharpest question in healthcare is not what happened. It's who gets to decide the story. Thank you so much for joining me today on Scalpel and Sword. And until next time, be at peace.
Every episode is an invitation to speak, to negotiate, to choose. I'm Dr. Lee Sharma. Join the dialogue by subscribing to Scalpel and Sword. Until next time, peaceful warriors, may your choices be sharp and your voice be even sharper. This podcast is a reflection of lived experience and research in conflict resolution. The Scalpel and Sword is not intended as medical or legal guidance. For personal matters, please consult a qualified professional.